You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof blew off and the interior walls got sucked out. And the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you doing, Brian?
We're doing very well. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for putting another one of these together. We're this is number 3 now. It seems like I think we're a little over a year since the last one. I know you got a lot going out there. 11 angling. You've got. We'll put links in the show notes to the past episode because we talked about Alaska. We talked about trips and traveling a little bit. On this one, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe Chile, New Zealand. You know, some of the events you have coming, the Texas Fly Fishing and Brew Festival down there. So I want to dig into all that, but maybe just give us a quick update. Since our last kind of talk over a year ago, what's been going on? Are you kind of all 11 angling all the time? Is that what you have going?
Well, it is all consuming, and it's a great way to be consumed. I have had the pleasure of working, and notice the quotations around that, working in New Zealand in last season, which was in their summer, December, and in March. Had a great 2 trips to Cedar Lodge on the South Island, and then 11 bought a lodge on the north end of the South Island called Owen River Lodge. And so I was down there checking it out, doing photos, getting familiar with their operation. So between Cedar Lodge and Owen River Lodge, you really have the 2 best fishing opportunities in New Zealand.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and you're out there. And what is your role? I know you talked about this on the last one, but with 11 angling, you go there to document it or talk about what your role is when you go there.
Yeah, there's a lot to do when you acquire a new property. So one thing is we immediately need photos for social, for websites, for any printed materials. So I'm kind of a madman going all over the place, fishing, of course, and then showing landscapes and lodge photos, food photos, staff, all that stuff. So that's a, really fun job to be given. And then just to get familiar with people there and get to know, what they like and what they do best, and just continue the, great reputation that most of these lodges already have. And so, yeah, it's sort of hard to call it work when you're out, stalking a 6-pound brown, but it is actually sort of.
Yeah, right. And you go over there, and do you also do some of the like hosted trips with clients and things like that?
Not too often, but I will piggyback a trip. Like a couple trips ago, I did a week with the editor of Gray's Sporting Journal, and then a week with Ross Purnell of Fly Fisherman. And so we just, go fish, and then I take photos for them and for us, and it really works out well. They're all usually just great people, so everybody has a good time.
Yeah,
it's great.
That is great. Yeah, we got. I've had Ross. We chat. I have John Randolph coming on too. I've been waiting to get him on to hear some of the story. You probably know John a little bit.
Oh yeah, I don't know, back almost 40 years with John.
Oh, cool.
And then Scott Cedar was the editor of Gray's Sporting Journal, and he's from Hood River, Oregon, and I lived in Oregon 45 years. So it's almost like going just fishing with your buddy, except it's a job.
That's right. And where are you at now? Remind us again, what state are you in?
Well, I'm in eastern Idaho, so I'm right between the Henry's Fork and the South Fork of the Snake. And that was the whole idea, was logistics and being fairly close to an airport, which would be Idaho Falls. And so if I go get groceries or gas, the nearest town is Rexburg. It's kind of a unique town out here because there's a BYU campus in Rexburg. It used to be called Rick's College, and actually Ross Purnell, fly fisherman, did go to Rick's College one year. And then he got smart. But anyway, BYU Idaho has 44,000 students in
Wow.
this little town. It's like the size of,
Well, what's the
I
town?
don't know, Rexburg.
Oh yeah, you're in Rexburg. Okay, yeah, we
Yeah.
were just there. We were I was up there doing some Euro stuff with Pete Erickson, and we had a trip. It was my first time on the Henry's Fork and the South Fork, and it was really amazing.
Yeah, so I just, college towns generally fairly inexpensive because they have so much, available rentals. I just found a spot that was on a country road that's 6 miles to the Snake and 15 miles to Goodwater. It's closer to the Henry's Fork, but I mean, Goodwater is 15 to 20 miles away, and then on up to Railroad Ranch and Henry's Lake. And yeah, it's pretty good. The winters are a little bleak, but fortunately, I'll be in Chile 3 weeks in January. I'm going back to New Zealand in 10 days. So
wow.
I try to get out of town a little bit in the winter. And there is a little ski mountain right here, which is kind of interesting. It's called Killy Canyon. I never have ever heard of it. And then one day on the radio, I heard sort of an ad for Killy Canyon, and I looked on my maps on my phone, and it said it was 12 miles away. And I thought, that's impossible. I can see 12 miles. I don't see anything that would be a ski, but up this little canyon on the Snake River, and there it is, about 3 chairlifts, and
wow,
you finish the day in a hot springs swimming pool for, I don't know, something like $7 or $8, and I work, and then I do a late afternoon, early evening, night ski ticket, and grab a beer and a pizza and a hot spring soak for about $85. I mean, that's hard to beat.
Holy cow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so there's a little something to do in the winter.
Yeah, right, there is. And as the winter started to set in a little bit, are things cooling down there?
Yeah, we're getting into the low 20s at night, but that's just how it is out in the northwest Rockies. But yeah, I'm enjoying it here. It's very nice.
Good. Well, like we said, we want to talk a little on the New Zealand, the trips, and really we're kind of framing this around, the Texas, like we said, the Fly Fishing and Brew Festival. Bo, who we've been working with, helping to get the word out on that one. I haven't been out there yet. I'm hoping to get there. I know it's in later February. You're going to be going there. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's just start there. What is the presentation you're going to be doing? I think you're talking about the New Zealand and Chile. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to do a Southern Hemisphere trout presentation. So it'll be, of course, Patagonia region in Chile, because we have 2 lodges there, and then also the 2 lodges in New Zealand. And it's really fun because I've done that show quite a bit at other shows, and it's really interesting because you start to show all the amazing fishing in Chile and the scenery, the food, the gauchos and condors, and you can just tell people are like, wow, this place is unbelievable. But I have to warn them. I say, no, you're just dating. You're just dating with Chile. I'm going to show you New Zealand next. And
right.
So you're going to see all that, those big fish, those beautiful rivers, the just amazing scenery and helicopter flights every day and all this stuff. And you're going to divorce Chile. And then you're going to get married. You got to be dating both of them.
You do. What if you can't date both? You have to choose one. Which one are you choosing?
I'd kill myself.
Really? You just wouldn't date? You wouldn't do it?
No, there's no way you can do one or the other. They're different, obviously, and then they're a lot the same. And really a lot the same part comes from, if I grab a fly rod off the rack and I fish the South Fork with a snake, it's the exact same equipment, same flies, wet wading or with waders. And you go from Idaho to New Zealand or Idaho to Chile, and it's a lot of the same techniques and the same insects and streamer fishing. So yes, they're all tied together. Fly fishing ties them all together. But then you realize that they're just so incredible via the people, food, scenery.
Yeah.
I could never pick. You
couldn't pick. Yeah. We had an episode recently on, I guess it was episode 523 with Trent and Janelle, and they talked about the DIY. We were kind of they've done both of these, New Zealand and Chile, but they did it on. It was a crazy story. In fact, we got some almost, I guess it was kind of hate mail on some of the, just because of, I don't know what it was, but the way they talked. But they did these trips on, literally, they went to New Zealand with zero money in their bank accounts and had just bought the tickets and went there and just stayed there for a month. And they figured it out, neat. Right? So they bought a car and and I think you have some of that experience, like when you first got going, right? Take us back to didn't you do some traveling early on? And then is that a lot different than what you're doing now?
Oh, yeah. Some of my 2 experiences were the same. That was catching beautiful fish in a beautiful place. But when I was 19, I got out of Lincoln High in Portland, Oregon, and I'd been saving my money, and I had a ticket to Auckland, and then you have to have a ongoing ticket. So I had my outbound was to Melbourne, Australia. And I flew down there in 1973, and then I stayed 11 months, and
Wow.
6 of that was fishing just about every day. And I, backpack and Fenwick fiberglass fly rod, Fluker medalist reel, scientific angler, Supreme line. I mean, all the old ancient stuff. I mean, was the cornerstone of sort of modern fly fishing. But so I hiked all the hikes and traveled all over, and I ran out of money because it was really weird. I had $500 US dollars. I got there and it was devalued to 380 New Zealand. And so 19-year-old kids don't know what that means. That just seems like they're stealing from me, or they're taxing me, or I didn't understand the valuation. And so I started sort of grumpy, like, geez, I only have $380. But I went for a couple months and stayed in youth hostels and camped out, and then I got a job on a dairy farm and kind of built up a couple $100. And then when fishing season was coming to an end, I was down on the south end of the South Island, all the way to Stewart Island, which is beyond the South Island, and then came back up and ended up in Queenstown and skied the season and worked as a dishwasher in a restaurant at night and skied every day. And so I didn't really make any money, but I didn't lose any money. And, when you're young and you're doing a trip like that, I mean, it just sets you up for your life is going to be, you're going to be just a bum, So I, of course, stayed in skiing and did, ski patrol and different things like that all over, and then guided and fishing. So I was destined to, probably never work in a tall building or, have some sort of corporate experience. But I actually ended up with that, working for Scientific Anglers. That was owned by 3M at the time. So you were part of the 3M world. Yeah. That's about as big as it gets. And then, Patagonia had great structures, Sims, Orvis. And so, I got, I touched the big corporate world, even though basically lived out of a van or a Subaru and fished a day and worked a day. But it all came together.
Yeah, it all came together. And now, and talk about the 11. We talked a little bit about this last time, but what is 11 angling, and what is the 11 in 11 angling?
Okay, that's the most common question I get, and as it should be. So the 11 came from Spinal Tap of turn it up to 11. So one more than 10. And so that's their MO.
Gotcha. Spinal Tap was a kind of what do you call it? A spoof band, not a real band, or what was Spinal Tap?
Yeah, I've actually never seen it. I don't even own a TV.
You don't? That's awesome.
No, I know. I just rather fish.
Yeah.
But Spinal Tap has a cult following of, it's I guess a fake rock and roll band and just the life they lead. But so 11, sort of is our, we try to exceed expectations by going 1 past 10.
Yeah. And who is the person behind choosing the Spinal Tap reference with 11?
Oh, the couple that owns 11, they have been to dozens of Grateful Dead concerts, and they just love music. We have a recording studio in Iceland now that's been used by quite a few known bands. And so, which is pretty cool because it's in the middle of nowhere. And I just think if you're a musician and let's say you're coming out of traditional, band towns, LA, Nashville, but now you walk outside of the studio and you're looking up at the Northern Lights, and
right.
There's no distractions. It's just pretty cool. I like visiting it. It's a really neat place, really techie yet super isolated. So
yeah.
That's fun, but you're gotta be careful. I'll wander off the subject.
Oh, I love this. No, this is what it's all about. The more I get into the podcast, the more I realize the more we just talk. We'll bring it back, of course. But
I call it rambling, but you can do whatever you want.
No, it's called podcasting. That's what we call it now.
Okay.
Instead of rambling.
Oh, good.
But, so let's bring it back then. So we're talking about, let's take us to the Texas. So for those out there, I'm not sure how far off people are coming from go to this festival, but you're going to be at this thing. So are you sitting in a theater and presenting some photos and talking about the trips, or how's that look?
Yeah, exactly. And, there'll be several theaters going at any time, and also casting demonstrations, all the normal fly show stuff. And little caveat to all that. Did you know that Bo and I are related?
No. No, I didn't.
No, I didn't either. Not until maybe 15 years ago. And it's sort of a convoluted story of people, but yeah, he's some sort of uncle of mine. And
Uncle?
I think so. Well, I don't know how it works really.
Is this like 7 degrees of separate Kevin Bacon sort of thing?
Yeah. My uncle, I think, married his wife's sister or something like that. So it's not,
Oh, gotcha. Not blood.
I'm not going over there for Thanksgiving, but
Yeah.
there's a connection, which we joke about a lot. But anyway, so Bo's shows are, fly fishing only with a theme of, like in Virginia, it's wine, and in Texas, it's beer. So great combinations. And so I'll have a booth there for 11 Angling. We, explain and answer questions for people that want to do some travel. And then our theater presentation is, like we mentioned earlier, the Southern Hemisphere trophy trout. And it's just a blast. I love seeing it. It's regular PowerPoint show, but it's once you're hooked on that type of fishing, especially the sight fishing and dry fly fishing for fish over 6 pounds, it's just amazing, and it never gets old. And so I'm probably giving the show and grinning the biggest grin.
Yeah.
Just because it's just so cool.
Gotcha. So you're taking New Zealand, so dry fly fishing for these giant fish, and you're just kind of walking through some. Are you talking tips on how to do it, or just showing some big fish in the area and stuff like that?
Yeah, lots of technical well, I hate the word technical information. It's still fishing, but it's New Zealand style fishing is the walk and stalk sight fishing. And when you get down to it, the time you're casting a day is in the minutes, because you're spotting fish, sneaking, creeping up, and then you get the right fly, you make the cast, fight the fish. So it's kind of like tarpon fishing. You're not casting all day, but when you are, it's nothing better. It's just as good as trout fishing can get. Chile has probably more variety in techniques. So it's, the hopper dropper type stuff. There's some match the hatch fishing in these huge eddies on big rivers where there's suspended rainbows, and they're really fun because the boat is hard to control in those eddies. So you kind of really get a teamwork thing going with the guide, and they're nice fish. And there's more streamer fishing, the dry dragonfly fishing on Yelcho Lake. And then there's the eeling. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's a little fish. It's in our language, we call it white bait. And then in Chile, it's puyen. And it's a really thin eel-like small fish. And that's why people call it fishing eels or eeling. They are actually born in the estuary from eggs on plants that are exposed to the air at low tide. It's really weird. And then the mice eat a lot of the eggs, but then the tide comes in, and that's what they like. And then they're hatched out in the estuary. As they get a little bit bigger, they school up and migrate up rivers all over the place in Asia, in New Zealand, other places. And people net them as they come up, and they're delicious. You just put the whole little fish with a whole bunch of them in a pan and make scrambled eggs with them and stuff like that.
And now, is this New Zealand or Chile?
This is Chile.
Okay.
But they have white bait in New Zealand also.
Okay.
And so, and Argentina has them, and it's a famous fishing phenomenon where these little thin, skinny eel-like fish move up into the river systems, and then the trout start schooling them up like you would see dorado or sailfish doing that in saltwater.
Wow.
And of course, once they get a good, bunch of them,
crazy.
There's generally going to be a little bit of structure nearby, like a stump or some rocks or a ledge, part of a eddy or something. And then they go on the blitz and they just attack them. And there's little fish flying out of the air. Some end up on dry land. And of course, nice little thin streamer, even more thin than a clouser, into that mix is just a guaranteed strike. So these are almost all going to be big fish, and absolutely, it's just panic mode with these little fish jumping out of the water and these bigger fish attacking them. So it's really exciting. And that's kind of a unique technique or experience in Chile. And a lot of people aren't familiar with that, but once they see it happen, it'll be their favorite style of trout fishing they've ever done. And it's super fun. So yeah, I do a lot of the tackle and technique, information, because I think more than half of the people that come to those shows don't plan on staying at a lodge. They're looking at maybe hiring some day guides, or they want to go do it themselves. And so the information's free. and that's fun. That's fine with me, and it's pretty cool.
Today's episode is brought to you by Northern Rockies Adventures, premium fly fishing trips in the heart of the BC Rockies. Premium all-inclusive fishing packages from Vancouver, BC. Daily fly-in fishing trips to get you straight to the action, and the lodges offer private cabins and the utmost comfort. Learn more about this exclusive BC fishing trip at nradventures.com/wetflyswing. And those are two places, that are pretty far away. It takes a little bit more effort to get there. But what would you say if somebody, let's just take it to the Chile, Patagonia, somebody's asking, they want to head down there. Maybe they aren't able to do the lodge. What's the first thing? What do you tell them? Do you direct them somewhere, or what does that look like?
Yeah, well, just like in the U.S., there's a few towns that are sort of trout towns, and Argentina has them, Chile has them. So if it was in the U.S., say it's in Montana, it's going to be Bozeman, Ennis, places like that with fly shops, guides, and close to good fishing. So it's probably best to, get oriented in a town that has a fly fishing culture, get maps and good information.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have all that already. But so anyway, a good place to start, like in Chile, would be Coyhaique, and then there's shuttle services, guides.
Okay, and how do you spell that, Coyhaique?
Oh, geez.
I'll try. I'll try to figure it out.
Yeah, it's pronounced kind of with an H in the middle, Coyhaique.
Oh wow.
So it's I'll let you handle that one.
I'll figure it out.
And those are good places to start, and plus you'll meet people, and there's pubs and places to get pizza, and you see people with Sims shirts on, Orvis or Cabela's. You can probably just, hey, what you up to? What are you doing? And then share information, and that's especially if someone has a decent skill in Spanish, you can really start going for it without speaking Spanish. It's pretty tough because it's hard to ask permission on some of the estancias or communicating with any kind of local. So some Spanish skills are nice, and then just being ready to find stuff and be ready to be shut down, and staying loose and having some time.
Yeah. So basically, get down there and just do some research. Like, if you're not, there's probably some guides down there. If you don't get a lodge, get your lodging, figure that out. But it is kind of, if you're going to Montana right now and you're going to drive there from somewhere in the country, you could probably just drive there with your truck, with your stuff, maybe camp out a little bit, hang out, get to know, stop by the shop. So it's the same thing in Argentina if you get down to one of these towns or Chile, that you could kind of do the same thing.
Yep, pretty much. I've done some, Subaru Outback trips from Chile, cross the border, go to Jurassic Lake, fish other places in Argentina, come back into Chile. And sometimes, it's no different than us. If you cross a bridge over a river, pull over, walk down, especially if it's the outlet of a lake or where a river comes into a lake, that's always a hot spot.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of there's public access, and then there's giant ranches too. So, you do need to ask, and generally people are real good about letting you fish because, again, there's not this fishing culture that we have that would be more protective of their water. And I've even had in Chile, outside of Coyhaique, a rancher kind of understood what I was asking, and he points to some of this area on the Simpson River, and those are the good holes, and then he runs down the dirt road and opens a couple gates for me. I'm like, wow, they don't do this. They don't do this in Wyoming. And so,
yeah.
And then on the way, down to the river, he says to me, stop at my house on your way back, and I'll squeeze some fresh apple juice for you. And It's just like, are you kidding me? This is really cool. So those fun things that happen when you're, just doing it yourself. But it's all good. I mean, your best trip for, is going to be guided, obviously. And then again, sometimes your experience you create sort of randomly will never be beat, just because they're magical. Like the guy making me fresh pressed apple juice for fishing his property. That was just amazing.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think if you have time, right, that's part of it. If you have a lot of time, like you said, you had 11 months back in the day. But if you could take some months off just to not have the pressure, instead of like going down and being like, hey, I got a week or 2 weeks. What do you think would be a good amount of time to spend down if you're kind of doing it on your own, just cruising around?
Oh, probably 3 week
Yeah.
minimum. Yeah, it's pretty hard to do the exploration and the hits and misses, and then have to go home.
Yeah. And what would be, remind us again now, if through 11 angling, what are the lodges if somebody wanted to, if they did have some funding to put that together, how would they do that? Talk about those a little bit, that experience.
Yeah, and you can get all that information on our website at 11angling.com. But so we prefer our sort of hardcore or very enthusiastic fly anglers to look at Martine Pescador Lodge, and it's actually 2 lodges. We split the week in half, so you see one region with a beautiful lodge on the river, and there's jet boats, rafts, and power drifters.
Oh, wow. And what part of Chile is that?
Well, it's south, and then the nearest big town is Portamont, which is where you fly commercial into, and then we take a little puddle jumper flight down to a small town of Chaiten, and then you're in just a beautiful region of tons of water. And the big body of water nearby would be Lago Yelcho and the Futalefu River that comes in, and the Rio Yelcho that goes out, plus the Palena River and Rossalot and others. There's a lot of rivers. And so, I like this 2 lodge program because at any given place, there's going to be places, streams or rivers and lakes even that are hot. The guides know where the best fishing, the biggest fishing are going to be. And then if you can kind of cherry pick those watersheds for 3 or 4 days and then move a couple hours and go to a different lodge on a different set of rivers and lakes and streams, and those guides know how to cherry pick the best there. So you really get the best of 2 trips instead of 1. And it just, I just say, if you go to California and you went to one little town for a week, you really haven't seen California, so it's just too big. And the same thing with anywhere in Chile would be the same. So you can see one region, move a bit, and see another. It's just different sets of mountains, rivers, and I just think it's a neat way to spend a week. And you never fish the same water twice, of course, unless you really want to. And so there's everything. There's little streams that have brook trout that for a day 1 angler, you will probably get, 50 strikes to a dry fly. And it's a great place to learn presentation, setting the hook, fighting, releasing. And then for experienced anglers who are really going down there to, target bigger fish, then it's streamer fishing and hopper dropper and other things that are just fun to do. So I think having that 2 lodge program just sets people up for seeing the best of the best.
Yeah. And do you find the people coming down working with 11 those folks are a mix, people like newer and diversity of like skill levels?
Yeah. Not a lot of first timers, but some of our lodges that do fly fishing and say heli skiing in the winter and whitewater rafting, paddle boarding, bikes, horses, the whole gamut, then yeah, we do get more first timers or beginner and intermediate anglers. And then boom, we're just out the door or in a helicopter going to a spot that's going to blow their mind. But at several lodges, and that would be both in New Zealand and Martine Pescador in Chile, they're really set up for people that are ready to go and just fish hard every day. And we make it a little easy on them. I don't know how many places do this, but we provide all the gear. So the best rods, reels, lines, Sims and Patagonia waders, jackets, boots, and lugging that stuff from anywhere in the U.S. or anywhere in Europe all the way down there is really sort of tedious. But you can take, especially coming home, not having wet gear and rod tubes and reels and stuff, you can really lighten your luggage, and it's just so much nicer just get down there, and then there's a rack of all the best rods in the world, and you can have right or left hand reel, and so it's pretty seamless. You just have to get there and then be ready. We like to fish, so we'll fish hard, and even when there's fishing out the front door, say before dinner, after dinner, most people are so wiped out they just want to have a cocktail or a beer and hang out and then have a big dinner.
That's right. Yeah.
Because we're so close to the water. We just jump in a boat and go, and there's hardly any downtime whatsoever.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, like looking ahead, I guess kind of where we are, where are you going to be doing hitting other areas the next year or two with 11?
Yeah, in fact, I've got a really fun trip coming up in early January. I'm going to go with sort of my neighbor, Kelly Gallup. So he's
Oh,
just
yeah.
over there. So I leave here, I'd go up towards West Yellowstone, then cut down Reynolds Pass, and boom, you're on the Madison River. And
Yep.
I've known Kelly forever. So he and I are going with some of his favorite people and a couple of mine, and we're going to have a week at those two lodges. And obviously we'll do some streamer fishing, but Kelly's beyond a
Yeah.
streamer fisherman. I mean, whether it's midges or any kind of match the hatch fishing, Kelly's got the game, so
Yeah.
it'll be fun fishing. It'll be just a blast hanging out and hot tubbing and having pisco sours. And so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then, I've got another photo trip to do to New Zealand because we remodeled a lodge, Cedar Lodge, down by Wanaka and Queenstown. And I've got to go get pictures of the remodeling and then, probably jump in a helicopter for a few days and get some more angling photos. But after all that, we hit the show circuit. So we'll hit,
right. Yeah.
both the big shows, Bo's
Yep.
Texas show, and then the fly fishing shows.
Yeah.
Atlanta and Denver and Seattle. Oh, there's a new show in Bellevue, Washington.
Oh, yeah.
So that'll be kind of fun.
Yeah, the Bellevue. That's right. Good. So so you do the whole show circuit coming up here, right? Coming up right around the corner.
Yep.
So on the travel, are you still, it sounds like you're traveling quite a bit. Is that something you still are loving, not getting tired of the traveling and all that stuff?
Yeah, in a way, nobody really likes clogged airports and delayed flights and
Yeah.
the things that can happen, especially in winter travel. But I'm actually not bad about those long flights.
Mm-hmm.
If I do San Francisco to Auckland, 10 and a half hours or so, I'm okay. I purposefully do not see movies at home. I will wait till I can find them on a flight and see movies. So if you go do 2 or 3 movies, you're looking at 3/4 of your trip. But then I sleep well on planes, so that's fine. So I don't really mind those. It's just the benefits outweigh.
Yeah.
And I travel on the cheap seats. I'm not in first class, but these newer planes are huge and they're actually not that bad.
No.
You just have to be able to be comfortable, sleep a bit, and next thing you know, you're there. And so, I don't love airports and all that stuff, but I love going to places in Chile, New Zealand, Iceland, Alaska, British Columbia, blah, blah, blah. So, it's worth it. It's fun. And I like to keep doing it for a while.
Perfect. And in New Zealand is the other part of that show we were talking about. You're going to be showing some slides there. What is that now? Same thing. Describe that again a little bit on the lodges there and what that looks like.
Yeah, so we have 2 lodges, one more towards the southern part of the South Island and just some of the most amazing scenery. And it's a fly-out lodge. It's Cedar Lodge. It's been around for 40 years and always has been a fly-out lodge. And so we, give everybody a great breakfast and you jump in the helicopter and you're out on some remote stream all day, no road access. And it's, pretty hard to beat in the world of trout fishing. And then our other lodge is Owen River Lodge, and it's set in the north end of the South Island near Nelson and Murchison. And some of those rivers are valley streams, and you'll be walking along a, sheep pasture, almost like walking in the park and spotting big browns. And then there's also road access up into the almost wilderness. Really remote areas, and the guides will hike in and we kind of scramble into these rivers. They're just gorgeous. It seems like you're the first one to ever fish them. You never see a footprint or an indicator or anything there. It's just wild. And there's the option of jumping in a helicopter on a daily basis and going into some really remote areas. So Cedar and Owen are both big trout, nice scenery. Of course, they're just going to be deluxe lodges with incredible accommodation and fantastic staff and food.
Yeah.
But, it's New Zealand shouldn't be if, it should be a win.
Right.
Everybody should go there. It just, you got to do it at least once. It'd be very hard to do it once. But, and you come away, and when you come home, and what people will do is ask, how was your trip and what was your favorite part? And you know what? Most people say the people. And that's, New Zealand's thing forever. And even Chile, even if you don't speak Spanish, you can just see that these are people who care about you. They love that you're visiting their country and having a good time. And, it's just a feel good
Yeah.
experience. Plus, oh my God, these monster fish.
Right.
So
have you ever thought about, New Zealand, moving there, just being there, or any of these places? Is that something that ever crossed your mind?
no, I've thought, what would it be like, but I've never really thought about doing it. I actually just love the fishing in the Northwest and the Rockies. And I don't know. And, back in the day, I kind of lived for steelhead part of the year. So I, you know, start up by Bellingham, Washington, and end up down by Ashland, Oregon, and go all the way to the Clearwater and everything in between, and just do that tour. But no, I like my 6X dry fly fishing on the Henry's Fork and
Right.
stuff like that.
Have you slowed down on the steelhead prior to a little bit of the dip in the runs, or is that something just?
Oh yeah, in a big way. Plus I'm pretty far away from it now, and it's about a 10-hour drive to the lower Deschutes. I could go up to the Clearwater and fish the salmon, but I, I'll just let those fish hopefully rebound. And they've had a few, good optimistic spurts of fish here and there.
Yeah, I heard some people are catching some out there on the salmon and Clearwater a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, it's good. So, and then what about New Zealand? So I'm looking at this now. You got the, I don't even know how to pronounce it, the Wilkin River, the Wilkeny?
Uh-huh.
Is that,
Yeah.
that's the
Wilkin.
tributary to the larger river that the Cedar Lodge is on, right? The Makarora?
Makarora, yeah.
So is Makarora a big river? Are you fishing the Makarora? Or is that a giant river?
Well, it's big but shallow, and lots of really great tributaries that come into it. And so, when you get there, you could just jump out of the car, grab a rod, and walk down. And yeah, when I went there in December, my friend Kevin, who was doing some drone work for me, he hooked two near the lodge, and then Scott from Gray Sporting Journal hooked another nice one. So right there, walking up the braids of the river, spotting fish. Sometimes it was first cast, giant fish. So it's nice to have in your back pocket. We generally fly out to where you won't see farms and houses or anything like that. So, but the Makarora is a great river, and it does have fantastic tributaries. And as soon as you fly up those canyons, you think you're not just 18 minutes from the lodge. It feels like you've
You're out
gone
there.
to another world. Yeah.
You're out there. What is that area of New Zealand compared to, say, like you said, Colorado, versus, you love fishing Colorado, the places there versus New Zealand. Is it just a people thing, or is the landscape a lot different too?
Yeah, different landscape. Definitely less people. In fact, you just don't see anybody in New Zealand or Chile. And both are gorgeous. 11 is from Crested Butte, which is one of the prettiest cities in the country. And so you get there in the summer with the wildflowers, or in the fall with the colors changing on the Gunnison River, or fishing the pocket water on the Taylor. It's just great.
Yeah.
And it's one, of many great spots in the West. And I think there's just good fishing in every state in the country. I don't care what type of fish it is, it's just great. But, I just don't like to compare a lot of things to New Zealand or Chile. It's just not fair.
Yeah. It's not right.
Yeah, it's just different. And it's just nice that you can have great fisheries in your hometown, and then, really do the max, the bigger fish, the amazing scenery, no people, great culture, great food. I mean, really the chefs that cook in New Zealand and our chefs that cook in Chile and Iceland and everywhere else, it's just mind-boggling. It's really, really amazing.
Yeah. And do you fly out when you do that, go to New Zealand? Is that a pretty easy flight down? What's that look like?
You mean from the States?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I like to leave out of San Francisco, but you can leave from Houston and other towns too. And, giant jet, probably seats 500 or 600 people or something like that. I mean, they're just huge. But they're big, and they don't bounce around a lot.
Just cruise down.
Just cruise down.
What is it, like 10 hours over there or no?
Yeah, 10 and a half to 11. And then you land in Auckland a couple of hours later, jump on a flight to either Queenstown or Nelson. And then from there, it's fish mode.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And so could you do the same thing, like get your ticket, go down there and find a trout town down in New Zealand and just kind of do the same thing?
Yep, you could. And, the language barrier isn't a barrier. And people rent little camper vans and things like
Oh, yeah.
that and
Camper
get
vans.
around on those. And
Yeah,
there's a
that'd be
lot of
cool.
water. And really, I spent quite a bit of time on the North Island on my first trip and then the trip afterwards. And lots of good trout fishing on the North Island. And then people do tend to sort of gravitate down to the South Island because you hit the Southern Alps and the beautiful scenery. And I mean, all of New Zealand's beautiful, even if it's not giant mountains. I mean, it's pastoral. These beautiful farms, just green is green, and yeah, you can just close your eyes and hold your phone up and take a picture, and it'll be great.
It doesn't matter, right? Okay. Yeah, I love get the camper van. What would be one of those towns that's kind of the trout town or a place you could maybe shoot off from down there on the South Island, say?
Whoa, there aren't really trout towns.
Okay.
There's just a lot of towns, and there's rivers and streams and lakes.
Yeah, doesn't really matter. Are there fly shops or things like that?
There's a little bit of tackle in Queenstown and Christchurch, but not much. No, you pretty much have to be self-sufficient. When I went down there as a 19-year-old, I took some flies, and pretty soon they were pretty beat up, and they weren't very good to begin with, as far as quality goes. And I had to go through barnyards and stuff and pick up feathers.
Oh, wow. You did.
And then I had to actually find, calf or cow hair on the barbed wire, and I'd pluck that off, and I'd just get thread from a store, and not a fly shop, but just regular thread. And I'd tie these sort of, hair wing, like a calf tail wing dry fly. And that fish just loved them.
They loved them.
So
do you have any of those flies left still from that many years ago?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Dave. I have one fly left. And now, I went down there in November of 1973. So this is my 50th year anniversary.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I still have one of those flies that maybe was a year or two old when I got it. So it's over 50 years old, and I have it sort of protected so I don't ever lose it.
Yeah.
But things have changed.
So you're not fishing that one down there. You're going to keep that the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things have changed a little bit. Well, that's the question. Is like if somebody goes down there now, they probably could find some flies down in the bigger towns, maybe. Maybe not.
Yeah. There's, general sporting goods stores that always have a little fly fishing section, and you could make do with that stuff. I mean, you could get a rod if you had a rod problem. You could get a net. You could get boots, and it's not recommended to take your wading boots to, different countries. Just Didymo and other problems with transporting microorganisms. So, and felt's not allowed. But even so, it's probably better to buy your boots there and then give them away or something when you're done. But you could take, rubber-soled boots, and it's okay. But, you can find some gear here and there. But most people at this day and age are going to do their research, tie flies, buy flies, and have a pretty good selection of stuff when they get there. Good tippet, that sort of thing.
Trout Routes is the most comprehensive mapping app for trout anglers. With over 50,000 trout streams, 350,000 access points, public land maps, and more, Trout Routes is the #1 resource for navigating, researching, and exploring trout streams, and it deserves a place in every angler's toolkit. I was in New York fishing recently. My first time in New York fishing, I had the Trout Routes app, and I was able to check out and access public access points through the maze of private property on the rivers we were fishing. And after I got into the stream and was fishing down through a run, I wasn't quite sure. I saw a house down below. I wasn't quite sure where the property lines ended, but given that I had Trout Routes, I was confident where I was fishing, and I was able to assure that I wasn't trespassing. You will be fully prepared with offline maps. You can get driving directions to points of interest, drop pins, add your notes in the app, all while keeping all of your data private to your account only. You can visit troutroutes.com right now to learn more and download the Trout Routes app for free in the App Store today. That's Trout Routes, TROUTROUTES. Start exploring today. And back to that slideshow, we're sitting there in the theater watching this, and you're just kind of walking through some fish pics, showing the mountains. Like, what is that? How do you set up your? Because you're a photographer too. You've got these skills. We talked about that in the past, but how do you set that presentation up for this New Zealand? So it's interesting, and how does that look?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to sum it up is day in the life, and so it would follow you through, this best eggs Benedict you ever had, and then what you're taking onto the helicopter and then some of the rules of helicopter travel. Hold your hat, don't point any rods are not set up, they're broken down, but you still don't point up anything above your head, and the blades are way above you anyway, but still it's just common sense. And then the flight, of course, is unbelievably beautiful, and sometimes the pilots will even sort of swoop into some valleys just to show you these incredible mountain peaks and things like that, and then land and secure your gear, and the helicopter takes off, and then it's a day of stalking fish, and it's all upstream. And it depends on the time of the year and what's going on, but I prefer the dry fly fishing. But at times you'll fish a tiny little bit of a wool indicator, New Zealand style, and a small nymph. But if there's bugs hatching, or if there's a lot of beetles and stuff, there's going to be dry fly action and the cicadas. So we go through, a day on the water, different types of stream. I usually show the easy walking valley streams, and say a guy has, or a woman, I'll just say an angler, has maybe a knee replacement or something, or a sore ankle, or doesn't get around with great mobility. Then, well, yeah, we've got these really low gradient, grassy banked rivers where it's just a blast because it's easy walking. You just feel really great. You can see fish, and it's perfect. And then there's kind of this intermediate zone of cobble rock, not so much gravel bars and grassy banks, but more true freestone rivers, cobble rocks, some basketball sized rocks. And then there's the headwater rivers, which are some of the most scenic, that blue water color, and big boulders, and the canopy over the rivers sometimes, or forest right on the edge. Gorgeous. And that's for, people with good knees, and they're pretty agile and can hop around rocks and ford the river 4 or 5 times. So I just generally show the different options for, how physical people are, how their mobility is, and they all have options. They're all good. It's just, if you don't feel great scrambling over boulders, then yeah, stay down the valley, and some of the biggest fish are down there. So try to show a day in the life, what it's like, come back, be met at the helicopter with a fresh cocktail, and then hit the hot tub or hang out, have dinner. It's the stuff that you wish never ended.
Right. What do you like the food? Do you get tired of or do you like cooking? Is that something, or do you enjoy the travel and people cooking for you out there with the chefs and all that?
Oh, well, it's the best food you'll ever have. So I got to say, I love that. And the homemade breads of all different kinds, bread, loaves, rolls, baguettes, everything. Amazing desserts. And, whether it's Chile or New Zealand, nobody is far from the ocean, so New Zealand's commercial saltwater fishing is world famous, especially blue cod, fish and chips, and things like that. Then Chile, of course, has fantastic seafood with oysters and clams and octopus and all kinds of neat stuff. So there's a lot of seafood, which you would think mostly beef or lamb, and that's there for sure. But
seafood is amazing. Wow.
Yeah, and at Owen River Lodge, they have a giant garden. So you just walk out there, pick the lettuce and the broccoli and the cucumbers and the zucchinis, and so it's definitely just garden to table. And so we do, mainly because there aren't big towns or any towns where we have operations. So we do farm to table before it was a thing, except our farm to table deviates usually through a winery or a brewery before it gets to the table, because I just love showing off fantastic wines from New Zealand and Chile, and great breweries. There's a lot of Germans in South America. I think I read there's 8 million Germans in Brazil, so their early influence on, really a lot of meats, the sausages, smoked meats, and beer. And so you have some fantastic beer in Chile, and they have German names, so What can be better than that, Dave?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, well, that's perfect. You're highlighting back to the Texas Fly Fishing Festival and the Brewfest, right? I mean,
Yeah.
is that something there? There are plenty of brews on tap. How does that look when you go to the event there in Texas? Do you partake? Are there a bunch?
Yeah, sure. It's fantastic. They all these different exhibitors inside and outside, and it's fun to taste different
Yep.
beers. And then, I was just down in Dallas a week ago to do a presentation for a group, and I checked where my hotel was. Then I did a barbecue near me, and there were 4 barbecues within, 15 minutes. So, you can do the taste all the beers, check out the coolest stuff in fly fishing, and wander a mile or two in Mesquite, Texas, and have fantastic barbecue. And it starts to sound pretty good.
Yeah, that does sound great. And what was that event you went down to? Was that a presentation just where you present on kind of some of this same stuff or a different type of deal?
Yeah, it was a group in Dallas that have homes in Crested Butte, so it's a little bit of our neighbors in Crested
Oh,
Butte,
okay.
and they get together once a year. So myself and Cameron Davenport from 11, we went down and gave a presentation on all the different options, from the Bahamas to Iceland to New Zealand, Chile, etc. And it's just kind of a big happy family because they're homeowners in Crested Butte that live in Dallas, and so great food, real fun. We ate a lot of great barbecue and street tacos. We did the Texas thing.
Yep, Texas. Just going back to New Zealand, what is, if somebody's planning that trip time wise, what do you think is a good time to head down there, plan your trip if you're looking ahead, say for this next year?
Well, any time, it doesn't really matter. December through March, and you have the greenest of green in December and January. You have fantastic weather midsummer, which is their January, February, and then it starts to be tipping towards fall in March, and you have a little bit lower water. You have super clear water, and there's just nothing. I'd flip a coin if I had to pick a place.
Any month. So if you said New Zealand, you could really just say any month of the year would be cool down there.
Yeah, because each month will have something to its advantage, either a type of hatch or maybe, whether it's the Pacific Northwest, Chile, everything that's on the ocean, New Zealand, there's clouds, there's going to be some rain, and that's just why there's so many rivers and lakes. And so, January, February are, not as rainy, if that matters. I don't care actually, but there's going to be an advantage to almost any season you're there. You'll hit the cicadas, or you'll have some other terrestrial fishing, or you'll have mayflies this time of the year. So,
wow. How'd you learn about like the fishing and where, like in New Zealand? Well, you've obviously been there, but if somebody's thinking like, hey, I want to get some resources, learn where to go, sounds like you can just go anywhere, but what would be your recommendation there just for somebody to get prepped on that?
Well, there's just tons online.
There's tons of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Everywhere, everything. And so pretty easy to get sort of dialed in. I was really lucky because as a little kid, my grandparents, my grandfather, Fred W. Johnson, he was a dry fly purist in Missoula, Montana, but he and my grandmother, Marie, went to New Zealand in the 50s, back when most people didn't even know what a New Zealand was. They thought there was shrunken heads like in New Guinea or something like that.
Yeah.
And they had to fly there via Japan. It took 30 to almost 40 hours to get from the West Coast to Japan. So you had to hop over these little islands like Midway and things like that. You finally get to Japan. Then it was down through Singapore, I think the Philippines, and to Australia, and then over. It took days and days and days to get to New Zealand. And then they, I don't know exactly how they got around. I know when they went to Africa, and these were just Forest Service people. They never.
These are your grandparents on your mom's side?
Yeah, and so they just saved and went. They went to Africa, and I think they bought a little station wagon car and drove all over the Serengeti and all that stuff. So pretty adventurous people, and so they fished these rivers. And I, saw the pictures, and then as I got a little bit older and was really getting into fly fishing, so my grandfather, really cracked the whip on my brother and I thought, well, it'd be really neat before I go to college. I think I'll go to New Zealand for 3 months, and I'll follow my grandparents' footsteps through their journals and maps and stuff. So I got kind of organized, and off I went. Well, 3 months went really fast, and then 6 months, and finally 11 months. But, so I had a neat little, sidebar to my trip of fishing the Buller River, and which is right next to Owen River Lodge. And I think I even recognized places they stayed that were actually hotels that had been around for 100 years. And it was kind of neat to put a place with their, original trip. In fact, when I got to Nelson in 1973 or 4, I couldn't really get out of town without hitchhiking. There was really nowhere where to walk. And so I got picked up by this older couple. And it turns out we made some small talk. They were going to drive me to the edge of town. And they said, "Oh, you're from America. Oh, we used to have some Americans that stayed at our hotel." And I said, "Oh, that's neat. Whereabouts?" And she says, "Oh, we were down on the Buller River." I said, "Oh, my grandparents used to fish the Buller River." And the woman just says, "Well, what were their names?" I said, "Fred and Marie Johnson." She goes, "Oh my God, we still get Christmas cards from them." So now
Wow.
I had a connection, and they would not let me out of the car. Nope, they're going back to their house. They had a cottage in the back. There, it's going to be my house. I was there for 10 days. They drove me around in Nelson Lakes National Park,
Jeez.
all these different rivers. They had a boat to fish in the saltwater.
Oh, man.
And that's just so Kiwi to have an experience like that. It's just the nicest people in the world. And so back to your original question, yeah, I had a little insider info, at least from the desire part and from some logistics, but one good map, and everything's on your phone anyway. So
yeah, your grandparents, Fred W. Johnson, and your grandma, they planted the seed for you, is what it kind of.
Oh, big time, yeah. This is kind of crazy, but when he was fly fishing for steelhead in Northern California back in the old days, he used gut leaders, which is intestine, sometimes cat intestine, and they're stripped into these thin little strips, and they have to be kept wet. So the entire life of the leader is damp to wet, and while you're fishing, they're staying wet, because if they dry out, they just break and they're brittled. And so when he would swing steelhead flies, he always had a little bit of slack. When a fish took, he would feed slack out so he could slowly, gently connect to the fish, but you couldn't set the hook; it would just snap.
Yep.
I mean, that just blows my mind,
Like a 10-pound fish on gut leader. That is crazy.
Yeah, bamboo rod and silk lines.
So your grandpa had it in him, and then what about that? Was there his dad? Was there somebody there that also had some of that angling? Do you know that history? That's going pretty far back, because your grandpa was probably born in the early part of the 1900s.
Yeah, he was born in the 1800s.
1800s, yeah.
Yeah, and my grandfather and grandmother were both college educated. My grandmother had a degree in biology, which is pretty rare if you're born in the 1890s. But
and worked for the Forest Service.
Yeah, and he worked his way up to be supervisor of several big, well-known national forests: the Kaibab in Arizona by the Grand Canyon, Mount Shasta National Forest, and then the Bitterroot Lolo National Forest out of Missoula and Idaho. And it was all great fishing. But he wanted to join World War I, but he was too young. Plus, he was really tall. He was about 6'5". And if you see me, like, where did I come from?
Yeah, how tall are you? Yeah, you don't have that gene, do you?
5'8".
Yeah.
And so he somehow got over to England and joined the Royal Air Force, the RAF. And I don't know all the rest of the stories and all that, but apparently there was some colonel or some high-ranking officer who my grandfather sort of worked for. And I don't think they were going to send an 18-year-old or whatever age he was, out to the front lines. But he worked with this colonel, and there just so happened to be all those famous chalk streams of England, and so this colonel was a fly fisher, and apparently, war raging and all, these still went fishing a little bit. And take my grandfather was introduced to fly fishing on these streams like the Test and the Itchen.
This is World War I or II?
World War I.
Yeah, World War I, yeah.
And so he just saw that. And then when he came back, I think he lived in Ohio at the time, and he started investigating fly fishing. And he was a lifetime angler, even with the most primitive equipment possible. And then my grandmother became a good angler, and my mom is a good angler. So
But you're not sure on that. You don't know the necks behind your dad's, your grandpa's dad or mom. You don't know.
No,
about that.
I don't think there was anything.
Yeah.
I think he was the start of it all.
Well, that's the start of. If you go back that far, now you're into literally the start of modern fishing, right? 1850s.
Oh yeah,
That's kind of when it started, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, okay. Well, I'm glad we got this little family history. I don't think we talked about that before. This is awesome. So, well, let's take it out here real quick with our little. We've been doing a Fly Shop Friday shout out session, even though it's not Friday, but we do have a holiday coming up here. So, I want to get a shout out from a fly shop. I'm sure you know them all, but maybe who your local shop is. This is presented obviously by Bo and the Texas Fly Fishing and Brew Festival. But who is that? Do you have a fly shop that you have nearby you, or are there a few?
Nothing super close, but I always stop into a couple. One would be the Henry's Fork Anglers in Island Park, plus across the street there's Trout Hunter, and you can always get a great burger and a beer.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll run up to Kelly's shop at Slide In on the Madison, and man, oh man, those 3 fantastic stores right there with some of the best guides in the world. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, you're in the heart of it. It seems like Idaho. I mean, you're right there. You literally are between Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. You're just right in the middle of the mountain west, right? There's some of the great rivers. Was that your plan? I mean, that was your plan, right? You thought, like, where is the best fishing? I want to move there first.
Well, pretty much. I was over in Eastern Oregon after, 40 some years in Central Oregon, with Bend being the main town, but living in that area with, great fishing, Metolius, Crooked, Deschutes, Fall River, et cetera, good lakes. Then I went to Eastern Oregon, and that was for brown trout and smallmouth bass. And then I came here because, I was road tripping out here every year, sometimes twice. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go live there. And I don't plan on owning a house ever again. I just want to rent and live in small trout towns or just small towns near trout. And lo and behold, not only did I, find and learn tons more about this area, because I used to fish Railroad Ranch primarily on the Henry's Fork, but of course there's lots more to do than that. But I also found really big bass out in the desert, and there's a couple literally small spring creeks that, as they enter these large reservoirs, have giant carp that look like Chinook salmon, and they're really super spooky, and it's really fun. So, it's when you think of living by the Henry's Fork or the South Fork of the Snake, you really wouldn't think bass and carp, but they're here. And then as the Henry's Fork and the South Fork connect by the little town of Manan, then it goes down all the way, past Boise and into Oregon and Washington. The Snake does, and that's all bass country. So the bass are not far away. Big smallmouth bass and largemouth bass, and so I have a lake boat and a drift boat, and the hardest thing to do some days is figure out where to go because there's too many options.
Too many, yeah. And what's your drift boat? What's your brand there you use?
Oh, it's out of business, but I guess someone has bought the molds. It's called a Yellowstone Drifter, fiberglass with a little wood trim on the top.
Okay, so it's a Yellowstone Drifter. Is it a standard? Is it like a low-sided, more of a like an old typical drift boat style?
It's a little bit like I think of typical. I think of like McKinsey Rogue Deschutes boats, but they have more of the high sides for whitewater.
Yeah.
This one would be a medium-sized boat, which is just perfect, because it's not as low as the Adipose, but it still can take some nice water. And it's old. I think it was made in 1978 or something like that.
Yeah, I see it. I'm looking at them now. I mean, they're beautiful. Yeah, they're cool because they're fiberglass, but they have that really nice wood trim. Yeah, it looks like a wood drift boat.
Yeah, I call it sort of a poor man's Boulder Boat Works boat because, drift boats, even used boats, they hold their price. They're super expensive. But I shopped and looked and looked. And I finally found boat and trailer, oars, anchor, and rope for under $4,000, which is almost impossible to do.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, boats. Seems like all boats now are 10,000 or more for everything.
Yeah, and this one had a brand new gel coat. So, except for being kind of an odd color.
What color is it?
Oh, so remember when you were a kid and you had your crayons? This would be like beige.
Oh, beige. Yeah, I gotcha.
It's just not. It's sort of like human flesh colored, I guess. It's just not a great color. But if you go on their website, you see their green boat and some others. They're just gorgeous.
Yeah, they do. They look really nice. Yeah, it's got a nice rocker. we did a little series on our drift boat history, so I'm always interested hearing about. That's another boat we haven't. I wonder who I'll have to track down. I'm not sure who was the founder of that. Do you know?
Yeah. No, I don't. I've been to their Facebook page just to see what they've got, and I think the new owner or owners are in Bozeman, and they're continuing the line of boats, and they're really pretty. I like them. I'd love to have a new one, but what's the difference between a new one and an old one? If it doesn't leak and you got a decent trailer, it's good to go.
Good to go. Yeah, when we did that trip up there, I floated with, we used Miller Boats, who rents Hyde drift boats, and it was my first.
Oh yeah, they're just down the street.
Oh yeah, they're near. And it's the first time I rode a Hyde, and it was that low-sided pram style, and I was just, wow, it was so nice.
Oh, they're so easy to row.
So easy. But okay, cool. So a couple more quick ones. We'll get out of here. So beer. What's your type of beer? Your go-to beer? What do you have? One brand or anything you could give a shout out to?
First priority would be cold.
Yep.
And it's sort of a time of day and mood. Probably more sort of lawn mowing beer for floating rivers.
But like easy light beer. So you're not talking a dark beer or anything like that.
No.
IPA.
But that's what I would have in the evening or up at Trout Hunter. A good IPA.
Oh, you would? Okay. Yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
What's your one steelhead fly? You can only pick one right now for any river, Clearwater, whatever.
Well, it doesn't have a name, but it would have a bright, hot orange bead, a down eye hook, and then kind of cactus chenille purple body and purple rabbit strip over the top, a little bit of flash. And if it was an Olympic sport, that's what I'd fish.
That's it. All right, perfect. And the final one, so looking back at where you are now, I can't remember your age, but you're 25. Think of your 25-year-old self. I'm not sure where you were when you were 25, but looking at that person, what advice now that would you give that 25-year-old if you can, what you learned?
Oh, that's a great question. It's super easy. Learn Spanish.
Oh, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. Baja, Cuba, parts of the Caribbean, all of South America. Yeah, it would be. And what did I do in high school? I took a little Russian.
Oh, you took Russian.
What good is that?
Haven't you haven't utilized that any of the steelhead stuff over in Kamchatka or any of that?
Well, yeah, I did go to Kamchatka, and I had my 20 words ready to go.
Yeah.
And but what a waste. If I had taken, I did take some night classes and some adult ed in Spanish, and you go somewhere and you do start to. It sort of kicks in again, but I'm a word guy. I'm not a good sentence guy. So I can point and say what the word is, but you just feel like such an idiot.
Yeah. No, it's always good to try to get more into the culture, right? Get part of it. Cool. All right, Brian. Well, I'll leave it there. We'll send everybody, like we said at the start, 11angling.com if they want to check out more of what you have going, trips and everything. And I think that's great. I think we'll leave it there. I appreciate you coming on again, and hopefully we'll get maybe another summary from you next year sometime and check in on what you have going. Thanks for the time today.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. And I just add, if someone wants to just see lots of really cool fish photos from all over, whether they want to book a trip with us or not, but 11 Angling on Instagram is really a fun place to see cool photography.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes. So at 11 Angling, that's 11 spelled out, right?
Yeah.
11 Angling. Okay. All right, Brian, we'll talk to you and keep in touch. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dave. Have a good one. See you. Bye.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country, so if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are, and I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.